The Law of Mind in Action by Fenwick, L. Holmes. Is evil a power? God is all in all. This is the philosophy fundamental to Christian healing. This is the healer's confidence. This is the truth whose realization is most essential to the acquirement of health. We must know that the eternal subterranean of the universe is not material but spiritual, not temporal but eternal. At the foundation is God. As the plant can never grow unless in the seed is the germ of life, in the sap is the principle of existence, so the universe must have at its heart the living presence of the eternal Spirit. As the Apostle Paul says, all must be subject to him, that God may be all in all. As the poet has said, God is above all things, below all things, within all things, around all things, within all, but not shut in, around all, but not shut out, above all as revealer, below all as sustainer, within all as newness of life. This is above pantheism because it not only identifies God with the universe, but it proves him to be more than his universe. Again, God is love. Therefore, he must have an object of his affection, so that man too has an individual part in God and this object of affection. God has personal attributes because he is conscious of himself as loving and directing his power to beneficent ends. How wonderful and significant this is! There is nothing but the divine presence everywhere. There is no real power except that of God. There is only one world. It is God's world. The only real world is the world that exists in the mind of God and in the mind of the individual. We live in a spiritual universe in which God is supreme. This means, of course, that there is no real power opposed to God. Jesus voiced this truth in many ways. He quoted the commandment, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God, the Lord is one." The pain and sickness and distress and want of the little flock were not due to the power of some evil force, but to the thraldom of fear and worry. Remove these things, and at once the law of good would operate for men as for the lilies of the field. It was not one power, the power of good, contending with another, the power of evil. It was the elimination, the annihilation of a mental mood that was to open the way for God's sunshine to fall. This then is the simple philosophy fundamental to this system of thought, recognition of which does so much to open up the way to health and peace and supply of every kind. The only power is the God power. There is no real power to wrong or pain in themselves. Truth is the only reality. Evil has only so much power as we attribute to it. With Jesus, we may affirm that Satan has no part in us. Thus, as darkness is legislated out of existence by the introduction of light, so evil is reduced to zero by the presence of the contrary thought. All this is in harmony with what we have learned about the law, that man makes his own universe by his thinking, for the creative substance is plastic to his thought and takes the form and quality which his thought gives it. The original substance is without qualities of its own, being merely electronic energy which is simply force created by the activity of the divine will. It is like the wax that awaits the imprint of the dye or the marble that has not been chiselled upon by the hand and mind of the sculptor. But original substance is moulded into form and takes character through the most subtle of instruments, the thought of our mind. It becomes to us just what we think into it, just as the mirror takes on the form and colour we give to it. If, therefore, we think limitation, we get its reflection in the lack of things. If we think supply, we get that. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he in his person. So what does evil mean? It is seen accordingly that evil lies in the consciousness, and there it lies and lies. But just what do we mean by evil is now a natural question. When we use the word evil of objective experience, we refer to physical evil such as hardship, pain, poverty, and pleasant surroundings. When we use it of thought, we refer to mental attitudes and experiences which are due to wrong concepts and choices of the will. This latter is called by the theologians moral evil, and they say it is some impulse or suggestion that was not worthy to be acted upon, but was acted upon by beings who had the power to do otherwise. Sin first came by the act of created free spirits, willing wrongly. But the theologian fails to perceive two significant facts. First, that the choice of the impulse or suggestion is not due to willful wickedness, but to ignorance, since no one would make choices involving suffering and loss if he fully realized and felt the force of the disasters that follow upon them. This ignorance of action would be avoided by depending upon the intuitive guidance of the spirit. But failure to depend on this guidance is not due to moral evil or wickedness, but again is due to ignorance. Second, it must be perceived that the objective experience in pain and poverty is but a reflex of the wrong mental attitude or thought. To be sure, a physical body, to be physical at all, must have the power of sensation, and it must be possible for it to have the capacity of unpleasant sensation, since such sensations are to warn us that we are out of harmony with our environment and the law, and that we must get right or perish. But the mind that is stayed on God or is in harmony with the law will intuitively perceive what is necessary to be done, and so will be kept from violating the law of nature. No accident ever befell Jesus because he was in perfect accord with the Father. There are many today who thus clothe themselves safely round with infinite love and wisdom. There shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. Thus we perceive that so-called evil of mind or body is simply the effect of wrong choices which are due to ignorance, but ignorance is not a moral fault. But the law is no respecter of persons, and if we think limitation and sickness and accident, we shall externalize it. Therefore, when we find ourselves surrounded by external limitations which are unpleasant, we must realize that they are but the reflex of our thought. Good and evil, both real, but effects. The question now arises as to whether health and wealth are not more real than sickness and poverty. Neither is more real than the other. Both are the same primary substance, energy moulded by thought. We can think one into manifestation as easily as the other. We realize that this is quite contrary to the usual concept of the newer teaching. It is said, evil, want, sickness, and so on are due to the lack of something. Poverty is a lack of wealth, but lack of something is zero. Therefore, there is no poverty. Ignorance is lack of wisdom, but the lack of a thing is zero. Therefore, there is no ignorance, and so on. Thus claiming that the negative is a lie, and therefore the experience is unreal. I am quoting my own former views, for I thought the same thing before I thought clearly enough. It seemed to me that when one thinks health and wealth, he gets it, but that when he thinks sickness and poverty, he doesn't get it. He only thinks he gets it. This was a mistake. What man sows in thought, that shall he also reap, be it pleasant or unpleasant. All effects are as real as their causes, and the thing exists in the thought as well as the thought in the thing. Again, it was a mistake for me to say, for example, that darkness, being the lack of light, is therefore nothing. The fact remains that the experience of darkness is just as real as that of light. If it were not, I could not be conscious of it. One cannot be conscious of that which is not. If therefore I am conscious of poverty or sickness, my consciousness is as true as my consciousness of wealth or health, or else I am conscious of neither. But I am conscious of both. What is needed, therefore, is not that I should change the fact, but that I should change the thought that produces the fact. If experience is real enough for me to cognize it and call it nothing, I am saying that there is a nothing as opposed to the something which is God or infinite, and I am therefore positing a dual universe and limiting the limitless. This is impossible. Therefore, my experience of health, wealth, and love, or my experience of poverty, sickness, and unhappiness are equally real. But they are both effects of my thinking. They are the reflex of my thought. My thought is the cause which takes original substance and molds it into these forms and experiences. The result is not to be termed either good or evil. Neither is the thought. It is not a question of morals, but of wisdom. If, therefore, I do not like the effect, I must change the thought. And in order that I may not need to go through all the awful experiences of pain and want in order to learn, I can draw near to the heart of God, who knows all things, and the Spirit shall teach me all things and guide me into the way of truth. God is not to blame for effects of wrong thinking. The question is always asked, where did the first thought of evil come from? And why did God allow evil and suffering in the world? Why does he permit war, famine, and death? And the answer is, he does not permit it. He has nothing to do with it. He gives us the power to think as individuals. He gives us free will and choice, and then leaves it up to us as to what we shall think. If we choose to think in terms of limitation, that is our affair. But we must bear the consequences of the law that we get what we think. We must realize that there is supply enough in the world to satisfy the needs of all. If we fail to take it, it is not the fault or work of God. If we bring pain and loss upon ourselves, it does not involve him. We must remember that these effects, which we do not like, are due to thinking in terms of limitation, and as God never thinks in those terms, he cannot cognize their effects. In other words, it is a question if God knows there are wars and death and all the rest of these things. The Lord is of too pure an eye to behold iniquity. Habakkuk 1:13. But did not Jesus say, "Not a sparrow falleth to the ground, but your heavenly Father seeth it"? Exactly so, but he does not see it dying, he sees it alive. God is spirit, he deals with the spirit, and in spirit there is no death. As Jesus quoted, God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. I am the God of Abraham. Unto him all are alive. Luke chapter 20, verse 38. The source of wrong thought. It becomes clear, therefore, that the thought of limitation is to be blamed on no one but ourselves. If we do not like our world and our environment, we must change it by our change of thought. Our environment is of our own making, and if we can move into the scenes and circumstances that fit our mental outlooks the moment we arrive at the consciousness that will draw us to our desired good. Heaven is a state of consciousness as possible on this plane as any other. Two people on the same street often live in worlds that are as wide apart as the spheres, because in the case of one there is constant thought of ill with its physical correspondence. In the other there is the constant thought of good. So we realize that the power to choose what he shall think and how he shall love constitutes the very vital spark of man's individuality. So too he can give or withhold his love from the Supreme Spirit. For God to have endowed him with less than choice would have been to make him a piece of mechanism. But he must pay for the freedom that he enjoys by the suffering that follows wrong thinking and failure to love. And his wrong thinking is due to his failure to love or to establish harmony between himself and the infinite wisdom. For when he withholds his love, he is out of harmony with wisdom and cannot be guided by those intuitive processes which keep him from making choices which plunge him into so much pain and unhappiness. The secret, therefore, of correct living is not found in the study of the negative or so-called evil, but of the positive or divine life, love, and wisdom. If our ideals make us, then we rise out of limitations by a choice of higher ideals. In the presence of light, darkness disappears. The rising sun has never looked upon darkness, for as it rises, darkness flees before it. Love has never looked upon hate, for when love comes, hate disappears. Harmony has never heard discord, for there is none in the presence of perfect wisdom. Wealth can experience no poverty, for there is no lack where supply is abundant. Joy knows no sorrow, for happiness is complete. Each of these qualities is then the whole truth for us. Truth is indivisible, and therefore their presence must be perfect and complete, and nothing else is possible when they are there. Conclusions. The value of this study, therefore, is apparent. The way to cure all so-called ills is the recognition that God is all in all. We must not be like the doctor who studies the dead body to find out about life. To study death will not reveal life. We knew a physician who made a profound study of insanity and was so impressed with the thought of it that he lost his reason. It seems well established that those who specialize in disease usually die of their speciality, a belief in that which is negative. Again, it is well known that materia medica rarely cures cancer and similar diseases because it deals with the disease, while mental science daily cures large numbers of such cases because it does not see the case, but only the perfect expression of life. We have known tumours to disappear in a night, cancers and other growths to drop away bodily by the realization of the positive element or the presence of life in its wholeness. We can come to only one conclusion. The way to cure the ills and wants and evils of life is to forget them, and in their place to set the mind on the beautiful, the good and the true. These become your ideal and automatically solve your problem. Whenever you are presented with a problem of lack in anything, simply select the good or positive factor which before was lacking and center your mind on that to the exclusion of everything else. Like the beneful dream at night, like the nightmare with its hideous shadows of unreality, all that is false and wrong and ill and tragic flees when we wake from the sleep of ignorance and fear to the truth that God is all in all, and beside him there is none other. This was the supreme teaching of the master metaphysician. The supreme metaphysician is he who knows in his heart that there is only good and only God. Realization. I am not dismayed. God is all, and there is none other than he. He guards, he keeps, he holds, he loves. No evil shall befall me, no plague shall come nigh my dwelling. He gives his angels to keep charge over me in all my ways. I am set free in the consciousness of truth. I am at one with the Father in consciousness of life. I see only the good and the true. I will never allow myself to see anything else. God is all. I carry away with me in my heart this song that sings in my soul all day. I admit no thought of ill or want or fear. I admit only truth and love and life. These are God's, and they are mine. God is the only power there is, and all that the Father hath is mine. I accept it, and I am whole. I give thanks. So be it.